You're listening to the Support Ed Learning Podcast, where we challenge the status quo of education and reimagine what learning should be. I'm Dr. Joe Sebastian, and in every episode we dive into critical thinking, Bloom's taxonomy, educational innovation, and how AI is shaping the future of learning. Whether you're a teacher, parent, policymaker, or lifelong learner, you're in the right place to rethink, reshape, and revive education. So today we are talking about the college admissions process, and I'll be asking Terri Koprivnikar about her Common Data Decoder system that has helped students secure acceptances to dream schools like Harvard and Duke, while others with perfect GPAs get rejected. So stick around to learn how some students with modest profiles receive multiple acceptance letters and six-figure scholarships. So welcome, Terri, to the podcast. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Can kind of get right into it. So you spent 25 years in college admissions and counseling and helped probably well over 750 students at this point, many of them getting into top schools. Can you share what makes your approach so different from traditional college counseling?
Well, I think the first thing is that I like to give students a realistic view of where they stand. And it's not to be a dream crusher or something, but it is to have them focus their time and attention on the right schools. They can spend a ton of time writing many, many essays for schools that they have a very low chance of getting into. And while doing that, they kind of neglect the schools that they really would get into and would enjoy. So it's really looking behind the scenes at what are their realistic chances of getting in, and what is it about the schools maybe that they like of that higher echelon, but that what other schools have those same kinds of characteristics, near a big city, a size, just something like that, because it's not really all about the name. It's really about what you do with the education from wherever you go.
Got it. So you have credentials from both IECA and is it HECA?
HECA, yeah.
Okay, so those are the two accredited for college counseling?
Well, yeah, I'm also a licensed
school counselor.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So how has your professional background shaped your unique methodology?
Well, I just think that I've worked at different types of schools, an inner city school, a school that is lower income, has maybe like a 40 to 50% of students going to college, and then two higher level schools. And so I've seen over and over kids that have not gotten into schools and kids that have, and it really starts to, it doesn't give you an absolute of who's going to get in and who's not, but it does definitely show trends, and it shows trends of those same kids, other schools they like, and how to help them see that it doesn't have to be the school name that's important. It has to be what you do and how you can maximize your education. All these kids have gotten to their schools by their location where they live. Even if it's not a public school, there's not people going, to a private school in Pittsburgh from California. They're going to a private school there. So they can make that school work for them, or they wouldn't be at the caliber where they have a chance of getting into these schools. So it's making the colleges work for you too. There's not just one perfect school.
Right. What does traditional college admissions journey look like for most families today?
I think the first step is really looking at what the student is good at. Kids may, from the time they're small, say, oh, I want to be a doctor. But keep in mind, a lot of that has to do with teachers, lawyers, doctors, policemen, things like that are careers they see. There's TV shows about them. There's movies about them. They've gone to a doctor. They've been to a hospital. They see legal dramas. But there are hundreds of thousands of careers that kids don't see. My own son had never seen. He had no idea what an actuary was, actuarial sciences, and that's a good paying job. So it's really looking at, first of all, what is the student good at? Where is their skill set, both in academics and in personal? So, you may be a great writer, but if you don't want to talk to people, then you're probably not going to be in a job where you're writing speeches and giving them. But you may write novels. Somebody who says they want to be a doctor but absolutely hates science, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right.
We have that all the time. Students who I want to be an orthodontist, but I got a D in biology and I never took anything past that. That's not realistic. So really it's starting to look at where their skills, where their skill set is. You can have the same skill set, and I used it as a parole officer, and then I use it as a counselor, school counselor. So, the skill set can be used in a number of ways, but really it's defining what that skill set is, and then maximize the academics that really play on that skill set. If you're a really strong math student, advance in math, take the highest level math, take the AP courses in math. If you're stronger in the social sciences, take those and really maximize those. And then start looking based on that, what careers play off those the most? What areas and majors can you most likely get into with your skill set, where you look the strongest, where a college says, oh yeah, they're applying for this major, they look strong in that area, they know they're good at that, they've shown that they're good at that, they're a good risk. Because when it comes down to it, the college is always looking at, are they a good risk to graduate, be successful, and make us look good? So then in 11th grade, it's really translating the career and your skill set to where can I go be trained for what it is I want to do? What are the schools that fit me for that? You can get a really good business degree from Harvard, and you can get a really good business degree from Penn State. Right. Which one fits you better? And then senior year is really focused on finishing those applications, really getting them out the door on time, looking for the decisions and offers are being made, and how many offers are being made, and should you apply early decision. So it's really implementing all that you've prepped for through the 9th grade, looking at the skills and the abilities, 10th grade looking at different careers, 11th grade looking at where you go train for that career, and then 12th grade implementing all of that knowledge.
Okay. Why do you think so many parents fall into what you call like the prestige trap?
Well, because the easiest way to look up colleges, if you want to say what's a good college for finance, is to look at the rankings. But what the rankings don't always tell is the top criteria in coming to those rankings. So if you look at U.S. News and World Reports and Niche and the Ivy Insider, all of those, they have a different number one right now. So, is it definitive number one? No. It's based on whatever the criteria is that they're looking at as their most important criteria. A lot of times that most important criteria is yield rate, and the yield rate perpetuates itself. So if you're looking at, I got into the school that's ranked number one right now, and then I got into number 137, which one are you going to pick? You're going to pick number one in all likelihood, right? So their yield rate keeps perpetuating itself. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have every top professor, every best program. Nowhere has that. There's a best for you and a best for me, and it might be a very different best. So that kind of, it's those rankings that people get caught up in and not really looking at, but what is it about the school other than the ranking? If they weren't ranked, would I still want to go there? And that's where kids should still be able to say yes, and kids should be able to be as excited about their target schools as they are about their reach schools, because everybody needs those.
So I'm coming up on like 20 years out of high school. And how do you think the college admissions, or how do you know the college admissions landscape has changed, let's just say in the last decade? And what impact has it had on students and families?
Well, one thing is a lot more kids feel that you need to go to college. Okay, so they are applying. The other thing is with the technology and things like Common App just exploding, it has become much easier for each student to apply to more schools. So, schools this past year had a record number of applications. UCLA had 166,000 applications. Wow. That is a lot of applications. Now, in the past, when you had to handwrite every application, which you probably had to do, I know I did, and you had to postage stamp them, and you had to, photocopy all your materials a bunch of times and put them in nice envelopes. You didn't do that to so many schools. But now with things like Common App, Coalition App, you do it once and you just hit the button and send it to 20 schools as fast as you can send it to one. It makes it more, it makes it easier. And there's the whole, kids feel now that you have to go to college to be successful, which we both know public education doesn't necessarily have to happen, but all of those kids, if they want to go to college, can go somewhere. There are no reject colleges in this country. they can go. It's finding the one that you're going to be successful at once you get there.
Got it. So just thinking back on your journey, was there a specific student or case that made you realize that the traditional approach wasn't working? Like what happened?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of kids where you can see the changes as things have gone along. So, years ago, I worked with a student who was from the Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
And, his parents came here specifically for the education, in the United States. And at the time, he applied as a Dominican student to every Ivy League, was a decent baseball player, and had really high grades and got in almost everywhere. Wow. Because at that time, Hispanic males were the lowest represented population at Ivy League colleges. It was 1%. Now that's not the case.
Right.
Did he have the success he had? Probably not. The other thing that has definitely, so working with him was a lot different than today working with, I have a Hispanic male that I work with now. It's not going to be that easy.
Right.
Now it's really, scores are coming back into play. And, SAT scores, I was looking and doing some research, putting together an Ivy document last night. And there really is only one Ivy League that even their average score goes down as low as 1510 on any section of the SAT. So really prepping those kids, like when is it time to start doing college, testing? Like I've said to some 10th graders, you need to prep for the PSAT so that we can see where you're really at when you take that. And I had a student that based on doing that was then realized he was way below where he thought he was going to come out on testing. So then saying to him, look, if this is your PSAT and it's a pretty good indicator of the SAT, you need to start prepping way earlier. And he did and ended up with a 1520. The SAT is not about the knowledge, it's about the skill on how to take the test.
Right.
You can learn to take that.
Right.
Yes, you have the math, but you can learn to take the SAT test. It's not an unknown. Okay. People know what they're going to ask and what formulas and what topics are on it.
Right.
Things like, schools every year have, the colleges every year have institutional goals themselves. What are they looking for? Is there a major that perhaps is, not filling itself and they want to keep running? I had a student that I worked with one time that, desperately wanted to go to Carnegie Mellon, and one of their lower populated majors was philosophy. It fit in with his skill set in the social sciences, ultimately wanted to go to law school. That fit perfectly. You can go to law school from any major. You just have to do well on the LSAT, which again is a known test that serves strategies on taking. So to get into the school, he applied to, that major. There's kids who have applied to Penn State for years into the agricultural sciences major that really didn't want to be in agricultural sciences. But then there's also, you play the recruited athlete. I have my own nephew had 34 offers for Division I and high prestige, including Penn football. And so, there's nothing anybody can do to kind of make that their ability. That was a natural talent. That was a natural ability. He's 6'4", incredibly muscular, incredibly, athletic. You're not teaching that. So it's really working with that other group of kids who don't have that in, and what can they play up? Can they play up their community service? Can they play up their, how their community service led into them creating a nonprofit that led into them? It's about leaving a legacy in your community. If you're saying you want to be a part of a college that really values community, then you need to show that you were part of your community. Probably most recently, I had a student who had targeted a school and didn't actually even apply at first, thinking there was no way he could get in. And I ultimately said to him, you have an offer you're happy with, but let's just look at this. Here's an institutional goal of theirs, is to keep students who come there in the area to then help the businesses in the area have really qualified students. And he said, really? I said, yeah. So research the area, make your connections to it, why you know that these companies are in that area. Those are places you'd be interested in interning and then working. You like the area. He's going to that school, actually.
That's amazing.
He did. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's doing what they were looking for and showing them that he was that.
You've mentioned previously when we've talked to students on different calls, you've mentioned the common data set. What exactly is it, and why don't more families know about this resource or how to use it?
This episode is brought to you by Supported Tutoring, where we don't just help students get better grades, we help them become critical thinkers. Whether it's mastering AP exams, maximizing college applications, or building lifelong learning habits, our expert tutors focus on critical thinking, confidence, and real growth. Head to supportedtutoring.com to find the support your student deserves.
Well, I think that the common data, first of all, it's a set of data that every college has to report every year. So all you have to do is Google common data set and the college, you can look it up. I think it's a lot of information, and you need to know what information is relevant. So for first application students, it's section C. You can skip the rest of it, because if you start trying to look through A and B, you're going to be like, this is a whole lot of stuff I don't need. This doesn't relate to me, which is true. It's other data they're giving. But section C is the first application. And it gives down to the number, female that applied, male that applied, female that got in, male that got in, how many waitlisted, and it's accurate. It's not like where you look at, the Harvard website, and it says we accept students, from 1,000 to 1,600 SAT. That may be the case, but I'm going to tell you that the person who's 1,000 was somebody who got a perfect math score and took the TOEFL instead of the verbal. You're not getting into Harvard with 1,000 SAT.
Right.
That's not happening. So if you look on the common data set, it'll tell you that 96% of the students scored 700 and above, and then another 2.5% scored 600 to 700. So that you're looking, there's like 0.6% that scored lower than a 600. I can almost guarantee you those were athletes. So, that just have to make minimums for NCAA to be eligible. But when you're looking at that and you see 98.7% had this high above or better of an SAT, if you're nowhere close to that, is that a good place to spend your time writing 4 additional essays? No, it's not.
Right. Okay. That would be a reach school, right?
That would be a high reach. There's high reach. Yeah.
Okay.
And you also, when you look at that, you also can look then at, their percentage of students that they take that are in the top 10% of their graduating class, top 20%, top 25%. When they have no incoming freshmen that are lower than 50% in their graduating class, and you're lower than 50% in your graduating class, again, does it make sense for your time and your money and, your feelings? You get attached. Oh, I stand a chance at Harvard. I really want to go there. I love it. I visited. Does it make sense to spend a lot of time applying there?
When you say bottom 50%, you're talking about class rank, right? Now, I've talked to a lot of families, they always don't know their class rank. And I said, what do you say to that?
Yeah. So schools don't have to give you your exact rank. In fact, the high school I work at does not do an exact rank, but they have to give you at least your percentage in the class. And the smallest percentage would be a decile, which is 10%. Okay. So, if you're, our graduating class rate this year is around 200. So the top 20 or the top 10%. So we'll tell them you're in the first decile. That's from the top to the top 10%. Second decile, 10% to 20%. And we have to give that on the application. So on the counselor's portion of it, it asks if you will do exact rank, what portion are they in by decile, quartile, or quintile.
Okay. So they can ask that and figure that out from there. And you spent a lot of time with other admissions officers, former admissions officers. What have you learned from them that most parents don't know?
I just think that they aren't trying to keep your son or daughter out. They don't know them. They go into it looking like, I will say that some of my favorite students might not have been the ones that even stood a chance there. To them, they're all paper. Yes, you can do a few things, meeting with them, doing a tour, but the bottom line is the first read of an application is by the regional reader. the person that handles that area. They know those schools intimately. They know which ones are high achieving. They know which ones grade certain ways, which ones weight certain ways. They know those schools. But those readers only take on average 6 minutes with the application, simply to say, this is kind of an average application we get, or let's move this one on. The ones that they see all the time that are common to them, like, they have really high scores, really high SATs, but maybe not in the 1500s. They've done a couple activities at school. They played a sport, but they're not being recruited for it. They see those all the time. So it's not standing out. It doesn't make it past that first 6 minute read. And then it doesn't go anywhere else. The only ones that go to committee are that. I was just, like I said, I was doing a document last night. There are 25,000 valedictorians in the country, okay, in the United States. If you put every Ivy League spot together, it couldn't take 25,000 students. So that is something that's not, I'm not saying it's not impressive, but it's not unique or uniquely impressive to them. There was a student in the area in Pittsburgh that actually found a cure for one strain of skin cancer. This was years ago. Is that uniquely impressive? Yeah, it is. Because he also had the academics and the scores and that. But a lot of people have those. A lot of people have those. And every parent is super proud of their kids. I know that. I'm a parent myself, super proud of both of my kids. But realistically, I looked at my son and said, we're not applying to schools that you don't have a chance at. Like, you're just going to end up feeling defeated. You're going to end up down on yourself. And ultimately, you're not going to go there. Like, that's not where you're going to be. You're going to spend a lot of time for no reason.
So once you've had these insights on how the entire process works, and how did you begin developing your methodology? Like, what was the process like for how you take kids through this journey?
Well, really looking at not just, kids will come in and it's almost universal. The first meeting, when you say to them, do you know what schools you're looking at? They rattle off a couple schools in the top 50 schools. But then if you say to them, okay, tell me without saying they're ranked high, what is it you like about that school? They can't generally tell you. Like, right. Maybe it's in Boston or it's an Ivy League. That's not why you like a school. Do you like a school because of a certain program? Do you like Brown because nobody has a major there? You can custom create a major. It's an open curriculum. There's no core requirements. You take whatever you want. If you want to take classes in 10 different departments, you do it. But if you're saying that that is your dream school, you should know that much about it. You should know it that intimately, that you can say, it's because Brown has this open curriculum. I can take classes in 10 different disciplines. I can custom make a major. I can do they have this, they have tea tasting, they have this tradition. You should know that much about the school. It shouldn't be that I like it because it's ranked high.
What were some of the biggest challenges in implementing your data-driven strategy with some of the first students you worked with in the college admissions process?
Just getting them to understand that the name doesn't mean everything. Like, it's, if you go to a competitive high school, and this is kind of how I said it to a lot of them, if you go to a competitive high school, like most of them do, right? These schools. And they realize if they were the bottom of their class at their high school, where were they getting in? And they're like, oh yeah, they're not going in. Well, if you're the bottom of your class from Harvard, and then you apply to med school, like, you're just going to be the same place. Right. You want to go somewhere where you can comfortably do the academics, engage in the activities, have the right activities. Like I always say, if my son would have gone to somewhere where they didn't have a hockey team, he would not have been happy. That's all he ever did from the time he was 3 or 4, played ice hockey. He played on several teams. He played all summer. He played all the time. If he would have gone to a school that had no hockey program whatsoever, he wouldn't have found his people. He wouldn't have found that outlet. Kids don't realize they're in school almost 40 hours a week, like a full-time job when they're in high school. In college, a 15-credit semester is 15 hours in the classroom. What are you doing with all those other hours? Where can you become the best you in those other hours? So if you can't keep up and have to just study all those other hours, again, you're going to come out of there and maybe apply to the next school or to the job and not have the extracurriculars and the hobbies and the community service on your campus to impress them.
Was there a moment or an event that you knew, like for certainty, that your approach was working better than traditional methods?
I mean, really just kids when they're very excited or they come back. You know, I've had a lot of kids, you know this, that come back to visit me at the high school and they've loved where they've gone. They've loved it. They've loved their experience. They're doing amazing things. I have a student who, you know, was initially between Johns Hopkins for undergrad and Pitt, and ultimately decided on Pitt because he said, it's cheaper. They're giving me a lot of money. You know, I'm at the top end of who they're admitting, so they're giving me money. I'm very average at Johns Hopkins. They're not. Knew he wanted to go to med school, so he was going to need more school. He's a cardiothoracic surgeon in California. He's very successful. And at this point, not one person ever that's a patient has asked him where he went to undergrad school.
Right.
Even one of the students that we have, that her mom works at our school as well, did not go to a prestigious school. She went where she could afford and where was going to give her some money for her sport. And she is now a pediatric brain surgeon in New Orleans and doing very well after 16 years of school for that specialty. Did not go to one of the, you know, Ivy Leagues or highly selective schools.
Right.
I mean, that's great. And kids come out of there successful, but kids come out of other places successful as well.
So there's a lot of buzzwords going on in college admissions now. We've talked about the passion project, that being a buzzy word. We kind of describe it as being authentic, being a standout. The phrase we have coined is congruent outlier, right? That congruent outlier formula. Can you explain what does that mean? And how is that better than the typical approach of being a well-rounded student, perfect at everything?
So the colleges aren't looking for a well-rounded student. They're looking for a well-rounded class that's comprised of a bunch of students who are exceptional at one or two things. That's what they're looking for. They're not looking for that one student who is the best athlete, the best. That's not realistic. They want kids who know how to focus, know how to dedicate themselves to something, really love it, and see it through. So that's what I try to tell kids to keep in mind. You don't have to be exceptional at everything, but you have to be more than exceptional at the thing that you say is your thing. So if you think of it in terms of an athlete that's being recruited to D1 schools, they would stand out if you put them on a football field with a bunch of average kids, right? And right up and down, the student we had that went from our school to Notre Dame, every play was his name on the PA system, right? He had thousands of yards. Okay. But he stood out. He was exceptional. Mm-hmm. So whatever your thing is, you should be exceptional at it. You should stand out at it. You should have more knowledge than the vast majority of people on your exceptionality. And it doesn't have to be on everything. It has to be on what you say. So there's spikes and starfish. So spikes has one that they're like crazy good at. And a starfish has maybe a couple that they're pretty good at. And then, you know, like a D1 athlete that, I mean, has dedicated her life to that sport, playing, training, that's a spike. You know, somebody who has, you know, developed a cure for cancer and wants to go into medicine, that's a spike. And then you have somebody who wants to go into medicine and has, you know, done some research in a medical field, has done, you know, some volunteering at a hospital or at a clinic. That's kind of like that starfish idea of a few things that come together to make you really good in that one area. And then when they put that class together, they're looking for all those things. So I've also said to a lot of kids, imagine if you went to a college campus and they said to you, we have an amazing student newspaper because we admitted every editor from every high school that was great at editing a newspaper. And you said, okay, well, what else do you have? We don't have anything else. Like, who's going to want to go there?
Right.
Right. So they are in the admission process looking for that editor, that tuba player, the swimmer, you know, to keep their campus vibrant. Who can do ethnic dancing? Like, there's a lot of schools that's a very competitive, you know, event, and cheerleading, believe it or not. I had a student that was a scholarship cheerleader to University of Kentucky. And like that, she was just so good. She actually was on the first ever United States Worlds team that performed at the Tokyo Olympics. I mean, she is exceptional at that one thing.
The congruent outlier we just discussed. How did this change or transform your entire approach to approaching college admissions?
Well, really looking at what that each student is that passionate about and how can they show that passion. You can't just tell it. You can't say, I'm passionate about medicine, but you've not done one thing about, an extra study in a class related to that, or volunteer work, or tried to get into research. You can't do that. So it's really identifying that thing and then really working on projects and programs and things to show your dedication to it, rather than to say, I'm dedicated and highly interested in this. You have to show it. So if you're saying, I'm highly interested in going into, business. I had a student one time he developed a program where we had identified that that's what he was interested in. But he said, that's hard because that's not research, really. I mean, it's not one of the fields that research helps a ton. But what he did was went to the nursing home his grandparents were in, and he noticed that a lot of the people there were having a very difficult time with tax returns at the end of the year, getting them completed. So he trained a bunch of kids, and they went up and they did tax returns for the people at a nursing home. I mean, he is now working on Wall Street.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I had another girl who wrote a curriculum that was adopted by Pennsylvania junior achievements all over the state of Pennsylvania as a middle school curriculum. And she wrote it because she felt like there's things through JA for the elementary, and there's things at the high school level. But what about that middle school level where, that's where you're learning to manage your own money? And, there wasn't anything. So she wrote it and implemented it, and she's at Penn. I mean, now, again, she had really high scores and really high grades, and really good. One of the big changes I've seen since COVID and tests being brought back is that there are schools, including some of the higher level ones, that are allowing students to submit an SAT, an ACT, or an AP. If you go into a science and you have a 5 on a calculus and a 5 on a biology, you're better off sending those because you show another way that you can show that you really have a talent in those areas, rather than sending an SAT, which is English and math.
Right.
Send your 5s in something you're interested in. For physics, if you get a 5 in physics, send it when you're applying for engineering.
What kind of results have your students achieved using this methodology?
I think they're getting into schools, and it's not even that they're getting in only to the high level schools. They're getting into schools they're happy at. And what, to me, as a parent and as a counselor, that's more important because, I had a student who went to Georgetown one time and hated it. And it's nothing about Georgetown. She shouldn't have gone away from home. And we knew that when she was going. There are kids who love every school and who don't like every school. It's everywhere. And so really it's seeing kids who finish college, finish happy, like their major, and get a job. I have a girl who's incredibly successful who went to a large state university, not necessarily one of the most highly selective, but she was just so good in her major that she's actually been invited back there and to higher prestige colleges to talk about business in the fashion world. And she's happy because she could really invest in the program because she could keep up easily. And so she had time to do other things and time to be, the fashion person for her sorority, and the fashion person, you can do other things because, and they're offered there, it has what you want.
Beyond just acceptance rates, what impact has your approach had on scholarship offers?
I mean, kids, so, like I was saying, there are some schools that don't give merit money, right? And that's because everybody there to get in is meritorious. They have those, you can't decide one from the other. So they would all get that. So then they rely on just need-based or, some other special criteria, athletes, artists, things like that. So really it's looking at, again, the student I was talking about that years ago picked Pitt over Johns Hopkins. He realized if I go to Pitt, I'm not going to have any undergrad loans. So I can go where I want to Johns Hopkins. We also just a couple years ago, since you've been at Hampton, had a student who got into somewhere that offered him no money, but was, kind of name wise very prestigious. But he looked at it and he said, this other school is offering me a full ride, guaranteed admission to med school. Why would you turn that down? Like
Right.
you could have a bad year at college for some other reason and, do something to your GPA or, have a bad test day on the MCATs. He didn't have to take them.
Right. Just got in.
Yeah. And so why would anybody turn that down?
You have kind of packaged this program into like your ramp up to college admissions, your college pathway program. What are the core components of this? What can you just briefly walk me through? Like, what does that look like at each stage of the game? And then,
really, as a ninth grader looks at what are you taking? Like, are you challenging yourself across the curriculum, or do you know I'm a math science kind of person? So that's where I'm going to challenge myself. Because there are a lot of places where if you don't start the classes as a ninth grader, you almost track yourself out of them. So really looking with a student at the beginning of high school for, are they taking the right classes? How are you picking electives? Are you picking so that you're with your friends? Or are you picking because you want to see what is business? What is, architecture?
Mm-hmm.
So really setting up the first year schedule, what it should be, and then looking periodically through that year at how am I doing in these classes? Am I doing well? Am I killing myself to do well? What have I learned about it? Do I still like this subject? Or was it like the middle school teacher that I just loved the teacher and I didn't really like the subject? Second thing is a lot of kids wait to join things. I hear this, my own son did this. Like, I'm not joining anything my freshman, I'm just going to get used to it. That's a bad mistake right now in college admissions, because you should be trying as many things as you think you might have an interest in and not doing things just because your friends do them, or not doing them because your friends aren't interested in them. If you're interested in speech and debate, try it. And so that's ninth grade. And then really at the end, doing a true analysis, true of yourself with your parents, of what went well, what didn't go well. What did I really like? What can I get rid of? Because, you should get rid of some things you didn't like as well, so that you can focus more and devote more time and more leadership roles in the things you really liked. So if you join, Spanish club and bocce and, like speech and debate, and you surprisingly found yourself really good at speech and debate, get rid of the other two because they'll take up time. Devote yourself to that. Maybe do one of the more prestigious debate camps to build your skill in that area. Show that you really like it. Practice public speaking. Maybe earn more NSDA points or make it to the TOC, which are like, that's the highly competitive form of debate. So really looking at then 10th grade, what am I going to get rid of? What am I going to keep? And how am I going to further show this path? And also really 10th grade, I got to get some volunteer, and it can't be 2 hours at the food bank, 3 hours at the animal rescue league. Now, animals fine if you want to go into something with animals, but like it should be a consistent over and over again, maybe at a hospital, maybe at, like a clinic or somewhere like that you can get repeated hours and build that repetition and that commitment to one organization, giving them a lot of hours. And then perhaps, later on saying, like, how can I take more of a leadership role within the organization? I've volunteered here for a year. Can I run your social media? Because a lot of nonprofits don't have a lot of good social media because the people in them don't have the time. But these kids are great at that. Can I do social media for you? Can I take more of a leadership role in your organization? It doesn't have to be a title. It has to be what you're doing. And then 10th grade, looking at, okay, this is what I found I'm really good at. What careers could this be? And then really 11th, setting up that 11th grade, the summer after 10th grade, setting up for the summer after 11th. Summer after 11th is the most important summer, but the summer after 10th is where it's kind of like doing the college application process, but for your summer program. So the better summer programs are an application process in which you have to say, what is your experience? What is your volunteering? What have you had? So that summer after 10th is really looking at, should I do a program? Should I develop something within my community? Can I do, figuring something out for that? And looking at that 11th grade schedule. 11th grade schedule, super important. It is going to be the last grades the colleges see when you apply, especially for any ED, EA, or REA schools, early decision, early action, restricted early action schools. You're not going to have grades yet. So they're going to base it on that, the QPA up till the 6th semester QPA. So up through your junior year. And then junior year, making sure it is the kind of banner year. So if you are going to apply as a business and your school has AP Econ or a CHS accounting class or something in the business area, are you taking it? Like, you should be taking that and not 3 gym classes and a cooking class. So, show them what they want to see and show them the highest GPA you can get. If there's an elective that you need, but you can push it off till your senior year because it's not weighted, maybe do that,
Right.
and get that. And then by December, you have to be looking at which summer programs are you going to target. If you want to go into medicine, are you going to target Hillman, or are you going to target BU Rise? If you want to go into computer science, you're going to target MITES at MIT, or you're going to target, there's a lot of summer programs specific to things, political science, or, careers like that. Are you going to look at the Senate Page program? That's a great program, but it doesn't make sense for somebody who wants to go into medicine. They would be better off doing like a research program that's, and the one at Hillman is paid. Like, they get paid to do the research on cancer, and then you have that to present to a college. So you've actually done wet lab research. And then that summer is very intensive. It's, looking at what the college applications are, doing some ideation for essays, and putting together, what supplements do you want to do? Which colleges, how many colleges does it make sense to do? If you're sitting at a 1350, I'm never going to tell a student not to apply to, a dream school that they just want to apply to, as long as they recognize it's a big jump, it's a big reach, but it doesn't make sense to apply with some stats to every Ivy League and then spend, between 4 and 6 essays for each one of those, and then not do really well on the one essay at the school that you probably will get into. So, and really looking at that, and then getting them ready to apply, and really looking at deadlines. Kids are not good, as we both know, working at a high school. Every high school deadline is flexible. Oh, I forgot my money. My mom forgot to give me the check. Like, we're like, okay, bring it tomorrow. Like, it's okay. That is not how college admissions work. At our school, a couple years ago, not one of my students, but another counselor student was a day late applying to University of Maryland, and they did not take the application. Their deadlines are like their deadlines.
Their deadlines are
deadline. And really, it's not just the college's deadline, but every high school has their own deadline. Our high school is 2 weeks. You have to give us 2 weeks to process. Does it take us 2 weeks to actually process your application? No, it doesn't. But we also have to deal with crisis. We had days off for weather last week. We have other students who have applied. You cannot just be the priority. And, there are certain schools, big schools. So University of Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, that will get 100,000 or more applications that all have to be there by November 1st. If every high school in the country is hitting submit at the same time, it's not your high school's computer system that's going to crash. It's going to be Common App and Penn State's. It can't take all those at the same time. So we tell them 2 weeks so that we can try hitting it 3 days before the deadline. And it usually goes. The day of the deadline, they're not all going. You sit there, we call it being beach ball. The little, thing looks like beach ball, spins and spins and spins.
Yeah.
And then after an hour, it tells us you got to retry. And we could sit there all day and do that to a lot. Yeah, we call it being beach ball.
Basically, ideally, families should start early, right, in this process. They're early, especially if they're trying to target a top school.
Yeah, I say any school really, because anywhere you go, if you're targeting a top school and you put together an application that's pretty cohesive and competitive there, you're going to put together a really good application for somewhere that then may give you a bunch of money, because you're going to stand out, because you're going to just have more than just the average application that's going to them.
What kind of support do students receive throughout the process?
I mean, a lot, help from essays, help with identifying summer programs, identifying, what kinds of things, I've often recommended kids who want to go into medicine, like take a course, take an EMT course, work on an ambulance crew. Like that's actual real life, are you going to like this? Are you going to do it? Kids who go into business, start a business. And a lot of these schools, especially Stanford once said they don't really care if the business is successful. It's that you're showing the qualities they like of risk taking and entrepreneurial attitude. Like they like to see a kid who will take a risk, start a business. It's not just everybody can start a nonprofit and then, it goes away when you go away. Like I say that you start something at your high school and it goes away the second you go away. That's not what anybody wants to see. They want to see, what have you given to your community that's sustainable for them? What have you started that can be carried on when you're gone? What's your legacy? Because then if you create one at your college, that's going to carry on. Only targeting things because of the name. Like I say it so many times, but that's not a good method. It's just not.
If someone listening wants the level of admission success that you offer, what's the easiest path to get started with your methodology?
Talk to you.
Book a call, right?
I'm
Book a complimentary call. Okay.
Yeah, I was
Cool.
gonna say that's not.
How often do you see the program paying for itself through merit scholarships?
I mean, a lot of times. I think if you're looking like being offered them or taking them, so that's a difference. Like if you get into a school that's like your dream school and they're one of the don't offer merit, as opposed like you could be offered more.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then again, but that also stands like, we've talked about so many times with AP scores too,
Right.
like, showing them a talent in that area, getting out of a class, or just even being able to show, like, I want to go into engineering, I'm really good at physics and calculus, that's going to go a long way. And, one of the biggest red flags that you can have at a selective school is you take a bunch of APs and you send no AP scores. That was one of the things I went to a counselor's conference on that. And that's what they were saying. Like, it's not COVID anymore. Nobody believes you couldn't take a test. And if you're taking 9 APs and you send none, they know why.
Yeah.
They know why.
So it's better, I mean, obviously not ideal, but it's better to send a 3 of an AP test to your dream school if it's not a 5 than sending no score at all.
Yeah, because they know you took something. I wouldn't send a 2 or a 1 because
right.
Reading into it that you did terrible or showing you did terrible is all the same.
I gotcha.
Like, you don't want red flags to jump out right away at things. And, the other thing that I think a lot of kids maybe do wrong in this process is, if you have something like that could be a concern, you don't address it head on and truthfully, and you try to like skirt around it and make a whole bunch of excuses. Look, if they're reading 100,000 applications a year and they've been in business 50, they've read every excuse. Just say what happened. I didn't do well. I didn't put the, but then say, this is how I would fix it. Like, I know where I went wrong and this is what I would do. Just don't say, yeah, I just didn't study and that was what happened.
Pull it off.
Like, you got to, and the other thing, kids will hope sometimes that a college doesn't see that one F in your transcript. Look,
right.
That's what you're trained to do. They're going to see it, address it head on, and be honest about it, because that's the way to go with those things. They're really, it's not good to think they're not going to see it, because that's what they're trained to look at. And most of the schools, and somebody just asked me this too about those GPAs, like, don't get so hung up in your high school GPA, because the most selective schools and a lot of other large schools too, they're not taking the GPA you send them. They are taking all that weighting off. They're pulling the classes they're interested in, and they're giving everybody, if they say an A in a regular level class is worth 4 and an A in a honors class is 4.25 and an A in an AP class is 4.5, they're doing that for every school in the country to even out your GPA, just like they even out the AP and the SAT scores. Because, our school weights at a 5. There's another school around here that weights APs at a 6. So our kids can never get a 5.7, but theirs can. Like, that doesn't mean they're that much better.
Right.
And colleges do look at kids in relation to the school they come from. So, if you happen to live in an area where, you know that your school is not like the best school, but that's where you live and you're a really strong student, you work really hard and you still have all the scores. It doesn't mean you can't go. You're evaluated in terms of your school, and your real competitors are the people from your high school. Like, what did you have the opportunity to take? Did you take the most challenging courses? Did you maximize the curriculum with which you were presented? Because like none of those schools, if you go to Princeton, they're not going to expect you to take the classes Yale had. They're going to expect you to take classes Princeton had. So they're expecting you to take the best of the classes you were able to take. And then, anybody, and I recommend this to everybody, to take self-study something in the area that you think you're interested in. There are hundreds of online free classes. Harvard offers a ton. I have somebody right now who's going to do one in politics and law and ethics. It's free. It's a Harvard class. So not only can you say like I was successful in a Harvard class, but I self-studied something that I'm saying I'm interested in.
Nice. Why is timing so crucial in the college admissions process right now, especially for rising seniors?
To be perfectly honest, they notice timing as well. So if you did absolutely everything from July to August, is it really a spike in natural passion and interest that you've wanted to pursue and you've really dedicated yourself to? Or is it something you picked because you should have one?
Yeah.
And I think you're almost better saying, I changed my mind a lot over high school, and not saying I had this passion, because when they're talking about a passion, we're talking about things that kids have been interested in for a long time and have stayed with for a long time. And a long time is not 2 months.
Basically years.
It's not a red flag if you change,
Right.
but address that head on and say, as I went through high school, I had never had the opportunity to take classes in business before. I thought I really liked science until I took my first business class. But then you need to be doing FBLA, you need to be looking at some volunteering,
Right.
Put a little more than just say, oh, I took one class. Because then the question for everybody in college side would be, did you like the class or did you like the teacher?
I guess what specific results can families expect when working with you?
I mean, I don't ever guarantee anybody results. I think that's unethical to do because I'm not the admissions office. If they work honestly and they work hard, I will work hard to come together, to put together their best picture of themselves. I think anybody who's going to promise results, either one of two things, they're self-selecting out kids who they don't think can get into the schools, like that. Right. That's common practice. Or, I would just never tell anybody that I could get you in, because first of all, this is not Varsity Blues. I'm not paying anybody off, and I really want kids to be at schools where they're comfortable and they like it. But I will work hard, if they work hard, to look for what are the best things for me to present. Like, should I present that I do this, or would this be better? And I'll work with you on that.
What would your final piece of advice be for families navigating the college admissions journey?
Try to enjoy it. And the two things I always tell parents, number one is anytime you do a visit, and these are kind of just like tips, right? Anytime you do a visit, don't get in the car and say, oh my gosh, that was great, how this, or I really love this, what did you think? Because kids want to please, right? First thing you should do, don't face is stone face, and just say, so what'd you think of Boston College? How did you feel about that as compared to Boston University? And let them have the answer. The other thing, I think that kids at this age are super stressed about this process. Don't be the source of more stress. So when they come home, it should be their safe place. Make it an arrangement with your kids. Okay, Sunday night at 7 is when we're going to talk college admissions. You need to be ready to tell me what you've done, what your thoughts are, how far you've come, what progress you've made. And I won't spend every waking hour and every dinner that you have to be afraid to come to dinner, because I'm just going to grill you about this. They're stressed about school. They're stressed about hearing teachers talk about this. They're stressed about hearing other kids talk about it, and other kids talk about where they're applying and what their GPA is, and what. Give them a place where they can be comfortable, and can be comfortable to say to you, look, I really liked IU. I know it's not as prestigious as U Chicago, but I really liked it. I felt comfortable there. I felt like this could be my home for 4 years, and I'd be comfortable there. Because at the end of the day, you want your kids to be comfortable and like it and be successful from there.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. If you want more information, click below or one of the links below to book a call with us.
Thanks for joining us on the Supported Learning Podcast. If today's conversation inspired you, challenged you, or sparked a new perspective, be sure to subscribe and share with a fellow changemaker. We'll be back soon with more voices, more insight, and more ways to elevate the future of learning together. Until then, keep learning and keep pushing the conversation forward.